Welcome to the Line Movement MMA betting show. I'm Daniel Levy from Best Fight Picks and Half the Battle. Joined now by Dan Tom of MMA Junkie and the Protect Your Neck podcast. Today we're going to be talking UFC Vegas 20 because it's going down this Saturday night as Jairzinho Rozenstruik takes on Ciryl Gane in the main event, heavyweight main event. You know the winner is going to be one step closer to that elusive title shot. And I have a feeling, Dan Tom, this one's not going to the final bell.
Yeah, that could be one of those fights for sure. I mean, I've been hesitant to say that with heavyweight fights. We've seen them go the distance, just recently in that small cage, but we got a small cage and two strikers, Dan, so it can get wild in there.
I'm curious what the stat is on heavyweight main events, though, because, I mean, you saw Volkov and Francis not even go past the second round. I know that's a completely different fight, so I'm curious if there's a difference between non-main event and main events, but regardless, it's time to break this matchup down. Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Ciryl Gane. So both guys with kickboxing backgrounds. I mean, if you haven't been sharpening your tools in the art of eight limbs, or also known as Muay Thai, these guys will knock you unconscious, Dan Tom. It's just that the interesting distinction here is that I've always considered Jairzinho Rozenstruik to be a top 10 guy, without a shadow of a doubt. But I've always kind of talked about Ciryl Gane as possibly being a future world champion. And I don't want to get ahead of myself because, the guy's only 7-0 as a pro. He's only beat one guy in the top 10. But to me, it's not about going on Wikipedia and looking at resumes and, gathering your thoughts from there. I look at the well-roundedness that this guy brings to the table. People are calling him a kickboxer. How come the kickboxer goes out there in his first two UFC appearances, wins one by arm triangle choke, the other one by heel hook? So it's kind of one of those things where this guy kind of catches you off guard. He's got that aura about him, and he brings something unique to the table, but it's not going to be a picnic against Jairzinho Rozenstruik.
Absolutely. Aura, or I'll go with another A word, athleticism. And it's a real common word, Dan, but it's one of those weird ones at heavyweight, right? Because you could be like, oh, if heavyweight just had, NFL level athletes, it'd be a different story if, we're getting those athletes. And I know the sample size is very skewed. I'm not going to pick on anybody there, but let's face it, being an NFL athlete, I think Shab might still be the best guy there. You know what I'm saying? But so it's not exactly the answer to everything at heavyweight. And as we saw, last week's main event, the better athlete doesn't necessarily, win the fight. So it's a weird way to skew it. However, if you want to accolade this guy as far as, having that athletic it factor that is Ciryl Gane, I don't blame you, Dan, or anybody listening or watching. Thank you. Like the video, subscribe. But it's because he does have it. You actually read it and he does come from a kickboxing and Muay Thai background. He has 2 titles in France as far as Muay Thai goes. I believe that's the extent of it as far as what's listed and what I could find. But he actually comes from, and both these guys do, by the way, they're both former soccer players. You know what I'm saying? They both, shouts to Jose Aldo and Kenny Florian. These guys are both former soccer players, Dan. And Gane does credit his athletic background to helping him pick up skills. And you look at it, you're like, yeah, man, like he looks like a really seasoned Muay Thai fighter, even with the small gloves and MMA and the UFC stage. Like he didn't look shook. His eyes are on the target. He's got that, he's got a real good eyes on the ball, so to speak. I mean, he's a little too confident in head movement, for my liking for anybody, just because it's heavyweight. But God dang, is he good at it, Dan? As far as slipping and evading the punches, kind of knowing what's coming, even having a radar for that awkward spinning stuff. He seems to have a good beat on that. It obviously transfers through to his kicks. And then, like you said, with the submission game, it's like, okay, maybe that guy does have that athletic it factor because he's picking up submissions, fairly fast. I mean, it's heavyweight, not the most craziest opponents, granted, to get those submissions on, but the guy's out there pulling it off in fights when it counts, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I mean, not only the athleticism, but the size too. The guy's 6'5" with an 81-inch reach. Both gentlemen have extensive kickboxing backgrounds. Jairzinho Rozenstruik, 76-8 as a kickboxer, Dan Tom. So I mean, when you've had over 50 kickboxing matches, over 60, over 70, over 80 kickboxing matches for Jairzinho Rozenstruik, so he's as experienced as it gets in that realm. You got to say the more well-rounded guy here is Ciryl Gane. Now, listen, I know that Rozenstruik's been criticized, for his past showing on the mat. I got to give him a lot of credit, though, because even though his takedown defense might not be the best, it's not like he loses his cool or freaks out if he gets taken down. I mean, he survived all the bad spots and all the fights he got taken down. Seems like he stays composed, and when it's time for him to explode and get back up to his feet, that's exactly what he does. So I got to give him a lot of credit on being defensively sound. But that being said, for Ghana to only be 7-0, and you're seeing him coming out here, known for his kickboxing background, getting heel hooks and arm triangles, like it just stands out to me, Dan Tom.
Absolutely, yeah, and a lot of those come off of the clench, which again, if you're gonna give any kind of striker an edge to pick up grappling or more sense wrestling, right? Even that, I know we're talking about, you brought up submissions, Dan, but it's usually the Muay Thai fighters on paper that's going to be the best, whether it's the females like Shevchenko or the males, because there's a lot of clench wrestling in there. You know all about that, Dan. Preaching to the choir, but it's there, and you see that with Gane. However, when you bring up the get up game for Rozenstruik, like, I don't think it's a criticism because the guy himself, has said from earlier interviews to more recent ones, he has no interest in the ground game. That's always going to be a flag for me, and it's not going to, I haven't picked against him a lot, but I feel like it may look like that after we get to the end here, Dan. However, I will say something interesting. You are correct to give him credit for keeping calm and that get up game. Now, it's not a bulletproof get up game, a tripod get up like a Derek Lewis, a light heavyweight or heavyweight, I should say. You don't have as much, risk for a guy taking your back, granted. So I don't want to critique him too hard, but I bring up Derek Lewis for a reason, is because it's not just the check hook that's going to be super live, right? For Jairzinho Rozenstruik. If you're a Jairzinho Rozenstruik better, you're going to be wanting that check left hook for this fight. But it's not just early and often. And I know Derek Lewis got it done a little earlier than he normally does in the second round of his last two outings. But I say Derek Lewis because he's got that comeback vibe where guys will take him down. They'll try their submissions and their grounded pound, but he really won't give them much. He'll kind of wait for his opportunity, that is Rozenstruik, and he'll explode up to his feet. And even though, unlike Derek Lewis, I still believe wrestling and grappling is the answer to beat Rozenstruik. You got to be careful because it's a 5-round fight. And just at heavyweight, part of the reason why I picked a Lewis over a Blades is because even though he got it done a little earlier, is that if you let guys like Lewis or Rozenstruik, who we're breaking down now, if you let these guys in the fight long enough, it's just a danger to you. We saw that with Overeem. Overeem was outclassing him on the feet with the southpaw left hands. I think Gane can land those here, Dan. We saw, obviously, Overeem outclass him in the clench and on the ground, but it didn't matter because Overeem couldn't put him away and eventually ran out of gas, got sloppy, and it just took all but the last 10 seconds for Rozenstruik to come up large against an experienced fighter in his first 5-round fight. So, the experience is actually technically on his side here, but I don't know how confident I can pick Rozenstruik, Dan. I don't know where you're leaning. We don't share this, folks, but I'm going to lean Gone here.
Firstly, I got to give you credit for being one of the only people on planet Earth to pick Derek the Black Beast Lewis last week. A very, very sharp pick, and I'm very happy he won, as you know. So that being said, you mentioned a similarity in the style of Rozenstruik and Lewis, and that's the fact that they have a little bit of a knack for the comeback. And on one hand, fantastic quality to have. The guy can overcome adversity. If you want to be a world champion, you better be able to overcome adversity. And that's something we haven't quite seen from Gane yet. And it's not because I'm taking anything away from Gane. It's just that no one's had the goods to put him in a bad spot yet. So I'm not saying that factor, favors Jairzinho, the kind of experience thing, but at least we've seen it. So I know that Jairzinho, if he's conscious, he's gonna do his best ditch effort to win the fight. So that's a very respectable quality to have. But on the flip side of it, is Ciryl Gane really a guy that you kind of want to fall behind against and then have to come back? Because you give a guy like Ciryl Gane an inch, he will take a mile. You give him a slightest bit of momentum, that's where he develops his confidence, and you start to see otherworldly type combinations coming at you, Dan Tom.
Yeah, and he does damage when he gets those. You're right, because you could maybe accuse him of being a point pitter patter guy off first glance, the way he's moving. But he's really got, like a lot of Muay Thai fighters, like even the great Anderson Silva and a lot of others. They like to take that first a bit to kind of feel you out. And I believe Gon has a lot of that, which you got to be careful of because, like you said, Dan, when he does feel it, he starts to pour it on. But what I like is that he pours it on with body work, but not just with body work, because, judges don't give a crap about that, sadly, but he'll mix in elbows and damaging shots with the body work. And in a 5-round fight, like you said, like how far do you want to get behind? And that was kind of a similar thought process I had, which is leading me toward the Gane pick. Now, it doesn't mean like, especially at the numbers, like go out and bet Gane. Like, no, in fact, I'm not even going to disrespect people taking a shot on Rozenstruik here. Like Dan said, he's a comeback guy. He will fight for your money, and he's live. He's live in there every second of it. So you could certainly justify a play if you wanted to. I'm not going to tell you either way on there, but let's just say I'm sticking to my analysis here, Dan. It's reluctant at that because, again, we haven't seen these things. It's taken nothing away from Gane, but we haven't seen it. Hence, it feels like there's a trap fight written all over it. That being said, I'm going to go with Gane to either extend this late with a contrarian decision win or win with kind of a surprise submission in the middle rounds.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Ciryl Gane fights with his hands down, and Jairzinho Rozenstruik can knock out any man on planet Earth. Not to mention his kick returns are seriously on point. He's got a nasty left hook, and he's got a knack for the comeback too. So you cannot count out Jairzinho Rozenstruik in the spot. That being said, Dan Tom, I think it's pretty damn clear who has the higher ceiling here, win, lose, or draw. Because again, when I think about Jairzinho Rozenstruik, I think he's a solid top 10 guy. I've just never quite made the transition over to future champion. Now, I could be wrong. I mean, maybe he is a future champion, but it just hasn't crossed my mind. Whereas it's crossed my mind since day one that Ciryl Gane might be a future world champion. Just the way he mixes it up, his presence inside the cage, the octagon is truly something different. And I don't want to see someone fall behind on the scorecards against a guy like Ciryl Gane. And, you know, if you're betting on him, you have to pray for some kind of comeback. Because, I mean, we're not just talking about the Alistair Overeem fight, Dan Tom. We're talking about the Junior Albini fight. Now, to a lot of people, they're talking about the Junior Dos Santos fight. Now, I bet on Rozenstruik in the Dos Santos fight. A lot of people say JDS won the first round. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the three judges scored it or who they scored it for. I kind of thought it was close. I thought it could have gone either way. But to my point, a lot of people thought JDS won that fight. Won the first round. And if he did, that's more evidence of Jairzinho kind of coming back in these fights. Whereas Ciryl Gane, I don't think he's even lost a minute of a round in any fight inside the octagon. So I do have to favor him here. It's just to what extent, right? You know, it's like he fights with his hands down. He's fighting one of the heaviest hitters in the whole division. But when you actually break down their kickboxing skills, even just in that realm, I've seen a little bit more well-roundedness from Ciryl Gane as well, just in the diversity of his attacks. Whereas with Jairzinho, it's the left hook and the leg kick, which, don't get me wrong, those two weapons will take you a long way in this sport, just as Justin Gaethje, especially when you consider the fact that Jairzinho Rozenstruik has over 80 kickboxing fights. So, I mean, he starts to chop down the legs of the taller man, then go upstairs with that leaping left hook, and he could put him to bed. It could be first L time for Ciryl Gane. But that being said, Dan Tom, I think that Ciryl Gane has options in this fight. I think he can mix it up on the feet with the more diverse arsenal. I think he can also surprise some people and get this to the mat. And he's got a little sneaky submission game to go along with it too, Dan Tom. So I got to go with the favorite here, Ciryl Gane. And it's no disrespect to Jairzinho, who I respect a lot. I think he's an incredible competitor. I think he is a top 10 guy right now. I think he's going to be a staple of the heavyweight division for years to come. He already is in my eyes. It's just that there's something about this Gane guy, and I don't want to get caught up in the hype. I don't want to just talk in absolutes like, oh, this guy's the future, this guy's the next coming, this guy's this guy's that. But there is something about him that stands out, and I got to pick him here.
Yeah, man. I last note for me on this. Another reason why I went with Gane is because he looked good in the small cage. Both their last fights were in the small cage against the same guy. Oddly enough, JDS, right? But the thing was that even though Rozenstruik doesn't necessarily follow or have bad footwork, he has good pivots. He stays ready to strike. That's why he's a good counter striker, right? He keeps his feet underneath him. However, he doesn't really, corral often enough. Even though that's where he got his knockout wins over Overeem and JDS. However, those guys were on the back foot when they got knocked out, because what does JDS and Overeem do? Have a bad propensity to do, and even in the fights they're winning, back up to the cage, right? And that's when he got knocked out. Whereas, as bad as both those guys were, as Frankenstein as they move in their older age, both Overeem and JDS, literally every time, Dan, were able to push Jairzinho Rozenstruik to the cage anytime they wanted. And it was only when Alistair was gassed slash half-heartedly not even trying to keep him in the cage is when Rozenstruik got off. Not once have I seen him meaningfully reversed or, got underhooks that he really had to work for. The guy seems clueless against the cage. So even though the small cage could favor your underdog here with the puncher's chance, it could amplify that action more, or it could push more toward the clinch where I actually like Gane's entries better than, Overeem's, and as good as Overeem is as a clinch fighter, right? One of the greatest. He was kind of lazy with his wrist control, something Overeem usually isn't against Rozenstruik. And I looked at Gane's, and he keeps those tight wrist controls that I like. Again, he's just fighting like well beyond his years. So hard guy to get a beat on, but also a hard guy to bet against at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Gane here.
Co-main event in the light heavyweight division, we got Magomed Ankalaev taking on Nikita Krylov. And Dan Tom, you know for a fact that this is going to be either one of the best fights of the night or one of the best finishes of the night, because when you look at the numbers for Nikita Krylov, 33 pro fights, 31 of them have ended inside the distance, Dan Tom. 25 finishes by Nikita Krylov, 10 knockouts, 15 submissions. So I mean, this guy's a bona fide finisher, and obviously Ankalaev, you've seen the head kicks, you've seen the big punches, you've seen exactly what this guy brings to the table. I mean, Magomed Ankalaev is a guy who he doesn't have a single win over anyone in the top 10, and people are talking about, hey, not only is this guy a future top 5 guy, this guy might be a future world champion. So when I hear that kind of talk, immediately I take note, and this guy is delivered, minus the Paul Craig fight, where we can write it off. I mean, listen, a lot of people lost a lot of money on that fight, myself included, on the under, actually. I didn't lay the chalk on Ankalaev. I was just like, dude, Paul Craig ain't getting past the first round with this guy. Not only did he get past the first round, he gets past the second round. He finishes him in the third. Probably would never happen if they fought again, but it happened the night when it counted. But that being said, Dan Tom, you know where Magomed Ankalaev's been training. He's been training with Coach Eric Nixick. And I got to say, Eric Nixick changes lives. I mean, have you seen what he's been doing with these Hawaiian fighters, with Puna Haley Soriano, with Brad Tavares, even with Maki Pitolo coming off a loss? That was the best performance of Maki Pitolo's career. You saw what he did with Dacha Lunjambula. You saw what he did with Sergey Spivak. I'm very curious to see, Dan Tom, exactly what Magomed Ankalaev looks like under Coach Nixick.
Yeah, me too. And there's like a whole contingent down there. I think last week we saw someone train with him. Who was the Russian cat? I believe. Oh, not even Russian cat, Ukrainian cat, Spivak, right? And he looked every bit of the favorite price that he was priced at. And then you also got Maxim Grishin, who we're not going to break down on this card. And I'll just say, regardless of my pick for that fight, maybe not as confident as him. Maybe Maxim Grishin's the dude to helping these guys train. Maybe he's more the trading partner equation. But the fact is, they got a pack of guys there, plus the extreme couture environment that Dan laid out. I really like it a lot. Of course, Ankalaev is Dagestani Stipe, and we got La Femme Nikita on the other side. And Krylov is 1-1 against UFC Southpaws. He got submitted by who was the Canadian cat? Oh, what's his name? Misha Serkinov, that's right. And then he head kicked. He's going against a head kicking southpaw, but he head kicked the last southpaw at heavyweight, which was Walt Harris, of course. He sparked off that finish, right? That was a crazy one. So he's 1-1 here. Basically, in short, Dan, Krylov, I don't want to label these guys as do or die fighters. We saw that with Derek Minner last week, and even in Krylov's last fight. I mean, despite him actually going to decision, despite being on the losing end, I'm like, wow, this guy doesn't even get to the decisions on the losing end. There's no way that's happening again. And in fact, Dan, there's no way this guy is winning a decision. And sure enough, he goes out and wins a decision. So I don't want to disrespect this guy by any sense. However, I do feel like this is going to be over in the first round, regardless of who wins, even if Krylov springs the upset here. And I'm going to split the difference. Again, he got submitted. He got a win by strikes, but I'm going to say he loses on the ground this time via strikes, because I know, Dan, especially going back to watch Ankalaev's career, that guy's got life-changing ground and pound. When he's not letting the Paul Craigs of the world hang out and submit him last second, that is. The guy has crazy heavy hands in his ground and pound. I imagine that only got better at Extreme Couture. I think he survives the storm, gets a ground and pound finish toward the end of round 1.
Listen, Nikita's a guy that we love watching, and one of the most exciting fighters, not just in UFC history, but MMA history, light heavyweight history. What's not to love about Nikita Krylov? And he's kind of like, not necessarily a mythical creature, but like a hardcore fan's like favorite fighter. Like people love referring to Nikita Krylov. When he fights, you're gonna watch. Period. And Magomed Ankalaev is kind of not in the same ballpark. Whereas, like, he didn't have the whole Al Capone thing going on back in the day, but he's in the same ballpark where remind me the last time you missed an Ankalaev fight. You know what I mean, Dan Tom? Like this guy's coming out here head kicking people. He's showing a well-rounded skill set. People are talking about him as a future top 5 guy, maybe a future champion. I think he is the real deal. And there will be some setbacks along the way. I'm just not convinced that this is one of them. And that's all due respect to Krylov. I've seen Krylov fight in Atlanta twice when he knocked out Ed Herman. And what was the other fight I saw? Let me pull it up real quick. Oh, and the second Ovin St. Preux fight. So he fought in Atlanta at Phillips Arena twice. Yeah. So actually he fought when it was called Phillips Arena, and then he fought when they renamed it to State Farm Arena. So bottom line, we got nothing but respect for Nikita Krylov over here, the minor. I mean, I've been down with this guy since he was called Al Capone. Now he's the minor, so all love, but I think Magomed Ankalaev's probably a little bit sharper on the feet. And then when it hits the mat, listen, Nikita has more submissions on his record than Paul Craig. You can't mess around, but he can also get sloppy. He can kind of sell out on guillotines, let you pass his guard, things among those lines. You don't want to do that against Ankalaev. And even though he had that one blunder against Paul Craig, I'm not going to necessarily attribute that to a cardio issue or anything, because I saw him finish Maxine Grisham in the 4th round prior to the Craig fight. So to me, and I'm not going to call it a fluke because that disrespects Paul Craig. He just got caught in his UFC debut. That's where you can bring up the 9 out of 10 argument if you really want to. What happens if they fight 10 times? They don't. They only fight once, Dan Tom. Props to Paul Craig on that night. I still think Ankalaev projects higher. Think he beats Nikita Krylov. I'm going Magomed Ankalaev here. Now, Dan Tom, featured bout in the women's flyweight division. We got Montana De La Rosa taking Mayra Bueno Silva, Chitara, as they like to call her, in Brazil. And Mayra Bueno Silva, listen, man, she is a finisher, Dan Tom. You saw her debut against Jillian Robertson, gets the armbar. And then her next fight against the tennis sound against Marina Moroz, the Ukrainian. Man, I know that was a loss, but I actually think that was the most impressive fight over UFC run so far. Because look, I took the dog odds on Marina Moroz, and let me tell you exactly why. That was the first event since the pandemic started. That's when Charles Oliveira fought Kevin Lee. Remember, the first ever UFC event with no audience. So I'm thinking to myself, because at the time, and this is before we knew that Marina Moroz was a much improved fighter when she moved up a weight class. So we were kind of still referring to her as the tennis sound maker, right? We thought she was kind of harmless because of her performances in her lower weight class. So I was thinking to myself, well, Marina Moroz, she's known for winning these judges' decisions, by making all these tennis sounds. And this fight's in Brazil, but there's no audience there. So even if Mayra Bueno Silva is landing the hardest shot you've ever seen, that the crowd's not going to be going crazy because the crowd's not there, Dan Tom. So I was thinking to myself, at dog odds, if she can just make enough tennis sounds, the judges are going to hear every single one of them. She can just throw out the air and we can win this decision. And when I tell you I had to sweat every second of that fight, Dan Tom, especially every stand-up exchange, I mean, Mayra Bueno Silva hit so damn hard that I thought she was going to knock out Marina Moroz at times, especially in that 3rd round. The area of concern is the takedown defense. She's been taken out in all 3 of her UFC fights. First one, though, she submitted Jillian Robertson, who's currently a black belt. Second one, she wasn't able to get up against Moroz, but she did some damage on the feet. And then third one, she gets taken out. She submits Barella. So very dangerous on the mat and hits extremely hard. With Montana De La Rosa, I feel like she's improving. I feel like that last fight against Vivi Araujo, she showed a step in the right direction. And she's very tough, it's very hard to get her out of there, but it's also not very hard to kind of mark her up. Her nose bleeds very easily. And I feel like on the feet, man, Mayra Bueno Silva is going to land some devastating shots. The area of concern is what happens if Montana gets on top of Mayra. I'm not convinced Mayra submits her, but I'm also not convinced Montana, stays on top either. So the ground dynamic is what I got the biggest question in, but on the feet, my man, Mayra Bueno Silva hits so damn hard for that weight class that I think she will damage De La Rosa, and I think she'll do enough on the feet to override anything that happens on the mat. I'm going to go with Mayra Bueno Silva to get this done.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm looking at the training situation right now because this is a fight that I may or may not be writing about on this week's Line Movement betting sheet. And props to you, by the way, on just the theory, because say what you will, but that theory paid off. And I say it paid off because it obviously paid off, but not only for the obvious, but like when you go back and watch that fight, granted, when I went to review it, I kind of had a choppy copy that I had to work with. So it was a bit jumpy, but I'm like, man, Chitara, and I had no qualms about it. I can't remember who I picked. Like I wasn't even, on that fight. But I was like, wow. I was like, Moroz, the judges must have really been sold on Moroz's point fighting and ki because if you look at the damaging moments, they were done by Chitara. I mean, from the face to actual like damage, which, and I'm not going to bring up a fight from last week, but this is why, people get so upset is because as recently as the pandemic era, and for most of our conditioned fanhood of a decade and onward, we're just used to seeing that happen, despite what the rules say, right? So it's really interesting how that plays out. Now you fast forward, that was the first fight. We're kind of well into it now. Of course, judges' scorecards are kind of all over the place. So, always beware if there's no finish here. The grappling is my question mark on where a finish could happen. But, Buena Silva could get herself another black belt here. She's been training, she trains with the shootbox Diego Lima, which is not Diego Lima you guys know from Levy's part of the world. This is actually Charles Oliveira, Chucky Olive's part of the world. Okay, she's training out of that camp with Charles, and she's going to go by a similar pedigree. She has the jiu-jitsu and the Muay Thai, but what needed to come and came last? It was the wrestling, right? So I'm going to leave some room to be surprised as far as Chitara's wrestling. I think when she gets that a better capability of it, she'll do better. She does have some defense in her head. It's just when she gets taken down, she's so aggressive, time marching forward. Sometimes these girls will time her and get a reactive shot. I could see De La Rosa hitting that, but unless she finishes her, I feel like De La Rosa is going to take a lot of damage, not just on the face, because that's where from defense to maybe she's also somebody who kind of bruises up and marks up easily. There's going to be that, but more specifically, which will come up in another fight we're going to talk about, it's the heavy-footed boxing stance. And even against her last opponent, who wasn't necessarily emphasizing on leg kicks, you could see the leg and calf kicks doing damage. And Chitara, she knows how to throw the classic, Muay Thai shoot box leg kicks. But if you look at her last couple fights, she's actually been good about targeting the calf, Chitara. And I think that calf's going to be wide open for her against Montana. So I'm going to double check where Montana's training. Her improvements, like Dan said, you got to give her credit where credit's due. And that credit, at least according to Montana, was Factory X. I see on her Instagram that she has spent some time in Denver. I don't know if it's that exact gym. She looks like she's got a good female stable there. She is a black belt, but I don't know. I think she's really going to have to get a dominant position, like a club and sub or like a back take position. I'm going to take Chitara here by a dominant decision.
Now, Dan Tom, in the bantamweight division, we got Pedro Munhoz. He's taking on Jimmy Rivera in the rematch. The first time they fought was actually in Brazil. Jimmy Rivera went to Brazil in his second UFC fight, and he won by judge's decision against Pedro Munhoz. Now the rematch is in the United States. You think Pedrinho Munhoz can win a split decision on American soil here to get the revenge?
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of hype on Munhoz back then. So I don't want to say that his stock has raised, but I will say I do believe whether it's the fans, whether it's the pundits, and whether it's justified, Dan, Pedro Munhoz stock has raised more since they fought last. However, I'm going to pick Jimmy Rivera for the same reason I picked him last time. It's that takedown defense and it's that counter punching, ring generalship, and speed difference. One of the faster 135ers against one of the slower ones, right? As we saw against Munhoz, we were reminded even against an older bantamweight. And that's not, taking a shot at Munhoz or Edgar, but that's just what the facts were, right? The speed, if Munhoz had a young man's speed, that probably could have served him really well in that Frankie Edgar fight and a lot of his fights. But that's a big factor as well. So I'm going to take Jimmy Rivera. Man, I get flashbacks at UFC Fight Night 77. Great night that was. But yeah, I'm going to take Jimmy Rivera here, even in the small cage. Again, you can make the argument that the small cage is more dangerous in the favor of Pedro Munhoz. But again, Rivera's going to be keen to the guillotines. He doesn't really give those up in general. He doesn't put himself out of position. And like that's the kind of guy that's going to be a nightmare if you're a Pedro Munhoz. You want to be able to freak guys out into panic shooting on you, something Rivera doesn't really do. So this line seems to be moving up. Surprise, surprise, Dan. It looks like there, but yeah, I don't blame anybody on the Rivera side. That's where I'll be.
I'll tell you this. I'll be very surprised if Pedro Munhoz guillotines Jimmy Rivera. It's hard to choke someone that has no neck out. You know what I mean, Anton? But the thing that won't surprise me is a knockout on either side, but particularly Munhoz knocking Rivera out. And that's not because he's the better striker or he's this or it's more so because Jimmy Rivera, if you have to give one criticism, it's his chin. And I know it's hard to say about a guy who, has had 27 pro fights. He's only been knocked out one time. It's hard to really, if you just look at the numbers, like, what do you mean he's got a bad chin? I mean, if you've been around for 27 fights, chances are you're going to get knocked out at least once. But he's been dropped a lot more than once, Dan Tom. He's been wobbled a lot more than once. And we've seen these two fight before. I actually bet on Jimmy the first time at dog odds in Brazil. Both guys dropped each other in that fight. Both guys wobbled each other. I'm curious what happens if similar moments happen here, because the way that these two fight, two bulls colliding, two bulls locking horns, man, they're going to go right at each other. It's going to be an impact. It's going to be a car crash. It's going to be an exciting fight. And I feel like Pedro Munhoz doesn't get enough credit for his knockout power. Against Cody Garbrandt, all everybody talks about is, Cody Garbrandt lost his cool, and then he charged him and went on a kamikaze mission. Yeah, but why did he go on a kamikaze mission? Why did he lose his cool? Dan Tom, the reason he lost his cool was because of a little something called the calf kick, which is now known as the most debilitating weapon in all of MMA. Pedro Munhoz chopped him down to a point where Cody Garbrandt basically had to make a choice. And the choice was, if this round ends, I'm not going to be able to get back up and answer the second round. So I got to go all out and kill or be killed and knock this guy out right here, right now. So I actually give Cody Garbrandt a lot of credit for that, for being like, hey, F it. Like, let's just go for it, because we know our mobility is severely compromised. We're not going to be able to, because that Cody Garbrandt's biggest asset is his incredibly fast hands. And what's something that boxers always talk about? They talk about having your feet under you. If you don't have your feet under you, your speedy hands and your crisp boxing ain't gonna mean shit inside the octagon. So it basically got to a point where, again, credit to Pedrinho for chopping him down, but it got to a point where it was do or die for Cody Garbrandt. He said, fuck it. He rolled the dice. It was a 50-50 brawl, the last minute of that fight, and he got caught. Props to Pedro Munhoz for getting him to that point. Another example of his knockout power. What's Rob Font known for? Is Rob Font known for his boxing, or is Rob Font known for his takedown attempts? I'm pretty damn sure 100% of the people listening to me right now are like, duh, he's known for his boxing. He's got the best boxing at bantamweight. Why did Rob Font shoot on the guy with the best guillotine in the bantamweight division? Because that's how damn hard Pedro Munhoz hits. Pedro Munhoz hit the best boxer in the division, Rob Font, so hard that Rob Font shot a takedown on the guy with the best guillotine in the division, got choked out in the first round. You cannot sleep on the knockout power of Pedro Munhoz in this spot or in any fight at all. On the flip side, he struggles with guys that can outpoint him. John Dodson went out there, weaseled a decision. Frankie Edgar went out there, weaseled a decision. Jimmy Rivera didn't weasel one. They went to war for 3 straight rounds. This fight, I think, might be a little bit different, Dan Tom. I think that Jimmy Rivera is going to play it a little bit more safe, try to stay on the outside. And even though on paper, Pedro Munhoz has more volume than Jimmy Rivera, he also eats a lot more shots than Jimmy Rivera. And you do not want to be eating clean shots against Jimmy, not because he's going to put you down per se, but because he's going to get a big lead on the judges' scorecards. And we know what happens when Pedro goes to close decisions. He doesn't win them, Dan Tom. And I think unless Pedro Munhoz finishes Jimmy Rivera Saturday night, he's losing this decision. So I got to go with Rivera via decision. And it's all due respect to Pedro, who, I mean, you got to give him credit for that Garbrandt knockout. You got to give him credit for dropping or for hurting Rob Font and forcing him to shoot. Again, I feel like it's kind of flying under the radar. I know I've repeated myself, but for Rob Font to shoot a takedown on the best guillotine guy in the bantamweight division, Dan Tom, like, does that not mean that Pedro Munhoz hits like an absolute truck? Like Rob Font, I'm not talking about Ronnie Yaya. I'm not talking about, Merab shooting a takedown. I'm talking about Rob Font shooting a takedown on Pedro Munhoz. Pedro hits like a truck. Jimmy's been dropped more than once. Jimmy's been knocked out before. Jimmy better not mess around. Jimmy better stay on the outside, mix in those leg kicks. And speaking of leg kicks, Pedro's got some leg kicks of his own. That sharp left hook counter of Jimmy Rivera. Just if he stays focused and has a disciplined game plan, the blueprint's out there on how to beat Pedro Munhoz. It's just staying conscious for 15 straight minutes is a different story. But if he does that, I think he'll win this fight. I got Jimmy Rivera via decision here.
Yeah, great point on Munhoz's power there, Dan. But I got to go with you too as far as Rivera and by decision. I'm not sure he gets him out of there. Rivera's got power too, and there'll be more of a size parity at play. But I'm going to go Rivera decision as well.
Now, Dan Tom, I'm very excited about this lightweight battle of prospects. We got Alexander Hernandez taking on Thiago Moises. Now, Brazilians have told me it's Moises, but I heard Anik say Moises, and I know Anik doesn't fuck up pronunciation. So, much respect to my Brazilian brothers telling me it's Moises, obrigado, but I'm going to have to go with John Anik's pronunciation, which is Moises. And I love this fucking matchup, Dan Tom. I mean, listen, Alex Hernandez, I know I've been hard on him in the past, but there's a reason I was hard on him in the past, because you remember the kind of shit he was talking before that Donald Cerrone fight? I kind of felt like, look, man, yes, you knocked out Beneil Dariush, which is an unbelievable. I mean, on your record, I mean, if you just pull up a record and you see a 30-second knockout over Benny, you're like, hey, say less. This guy's legit, right? But the thing is, every single time he's been past the first round, shit has definitely gotten sketchy with Alexander Hernandez. It's because he goes so damn hard. But you stand up to him, and that's when he doesn't do as well. But on the flip side, Moises is another guy who I think it's been mental this entire time, Dan Tom, because the guy is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I mean, you saw that fucking helicopter armbar he hit on the regional scene before he made it to the UFC. You know what kind of black belt he is. You see how damn hard he hits, how hard he kicks. Like, you saw Bobby Green will get off on like a 5-punch combination. Thiago Moises will return with one shot. It'll visibly affect Bobby Green. So that's why when you look at the numbers for that fight and it says, well, Bobby Green doubled him up on strikes, that must have been a robbery. That was no robbery, my friends, because when you actually watch it, the most impactful shots of that fight were 100% landed by Thiago Moises. I felt like he played that safe. So there's criticism for both fighters and there's praise for both fighters. The criticism for Moises is this. So it's only mental criticism, because I can't criticize his heavy hands. I can't criticize his kicks. I can't criticize his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and his ever improving wrestling and the experience he's starting to gain inside the octagon. The fact that he's 25 years old, I can't say a damn thing about that. Oh yeah, and Dan Tom, the fact that in 18 pro fights, guess how many times Thiago Moises has been finished? 0. So I can't knock his durability either. It's just sometimes he'll let guys kind of tee off on him, and I'm trying to figure out in my mind, is it a situation where he shows them a little bit too much respect? Is he kind of playing possum, waiting for the perfect counter because he does hit very, very hard? Or is he just simply always going to kind of have low output and he's going to get by landing the harder shots? Because Hernandez, that first round, he's hell on wheels, Dan Tom. Alex Hernandez, he tries to come out like TJ Dillashaw. But with that being said, TJ Dillashaw is a bantamweight. There's a reason TJ can keep up that pace. And I'm not even talking about the EPO, which he tested positive for. That's not me throwing some speculation out there. So, not being a bantamweight, it's going to be hard to push that pace for all three. But in that first round, look, Alex Hernandez is winning the first round, period. But if he does not finish Thiago Moises in the first round, then what? That OAM fight, got so sketch after the first round. And literally, OAM gave that fight away. Let me tell you why. OAM takes down Alex Hernandez. He gets on top of him. And hey, Olivier, stay on top of him and you win the round. Instead, he wants to go for one of his TriStar leg locks. Like, dude, you're not Faraz, you're not GSP. You're so he drops back for one of his leg locks, gives up position, loses the fight because of a dumb mistake. It wasn't really because Alex Hernandez looked spectacular. Next fight against Donald Cowboy Cerrone goes past the first round, and boy, oh boy, did the wheels fall off very quickly. Very next fight against Francisco Trinaldo in Texas. Now, we already know. You want to talk about bad decisions in Vegas? Well, Vegas has the best decisions on planet Earth if you want to compare it to Texas, because Texas, hashtag 3026 Bosch. Go watch CB Dollaway versus Tim Bosch, where CB Dollaway clearly won the fight, and then they scored at 30-26 Bosch. So it's one of those things in Texas. I mean, you leave it to the judges' scorecards in Texas, especially against a guy from Texas, which is what Alexander Hernandez is. I mean, I had a 30-27 Trinaldo, 29-28 if you want to be nice. Two judges had a 30-27 Alex Hernandez. But the bottom line is, shit got sketchy when it got past the first round. And then after that, Dan Tom, he moves to Factory X. And a lot of people are under the assumption that he's a brand new man now. And here's what I'll say on that front. He's definitely improving. I mean, listen, he's only 28 years old. He's entering his prime. So no doubt about it. No questions asked. With all the experiences he's had and with all the guys he's fought, I mean, because you can't knock his level of competition. This guy's been in there with Benny, with Cowboy, with Trinaldo, with Dober. Like, you can't knock this guy's experience. He's only going to get better. But every time he goes past the first round, shit gets sketchy. I forgot to mention the Drew Dober fight. What happened when him being the bully didn't work out? He got teed off. He got standing TKO'd. And basically, I know you got to give credit to Dober. Dober definitely hurt him bad. But Hernandez also kind of was like, no mas in that fight. There's nothing wrong with that. Dober's just on a different level than you. But the Gritzmacher fight, let's talk about that. So a lot of people are saying this is Alexander Hernandez 2.0. He's training with Mark Montoya. And Mark Montoya, one of the best coaches on planet Earth. Much respect to him. So I'm sure Alex is making big improvements. I'm not doubting that at all. Here's what I'm doubting, Dan Tom. Don't you think that Alex Hernandez would have knocked out Chris Gritzmacher in the first round at any camp? Don't you think that he didn't even have to make that change and he would have still knocked him out in the first? Like, Alex is on a different level than Chris Gritzmacher. Look, I like Chris Gritzmacher. He cashed an underdog ticket for me against Joe Lozon. I respect the guy a lot, but Alex Hernandez is too fast, too athletic. He's just better than him. No guy that knocked out Beneil Dariush is losing a fight to Chris Gritzmacher, period. The thing is, man, Thiago Moises is no Chris Gritzmacher. We're dealing with an improving kid who's only 25 years old, who's a nasty black belt, who hits like a truck. And my favorite part about it, Dan Tom, he can win fights that go past the first round. He can overcome adversity, because look at that first round against Michael Johnson. I mean, Michael, who, people used to call him Blackie because, like Manny Pacquiao, he's got some of the fastest hands in that division. That's what he was known for. The guy knocked out Dustin Poirier back in the day. Thiago Moises kind of got a little bit of a whooping in that first round. He comes out in that second round, he submits him right away. The Bobby Green fight. Bobby's always been known for his hands in MMA. Bobby is known for Bobby styles on guys. I mean, only Dustin Poirier has put Bobby away inside the octagon. And whenever Bobby was trying to do, a little bit of his flashy moves on Thiago would counter him with some shots that visibly impacted him. So this fight gets past the first round, and I'm very curious what happens. So here are my concerns for Moises. And I know I'm being long-winded, but I'm just very excited for this fight, Dan Tom. My concern for Moises are getting out-wrestled, kind of like he did in the Beneil fight. But at the same time, Hernandez is not the grappler that Beneil is. I know he beat Beneil, but he's not the grappler that Beneil is. And Moises attacked Beneil with some deep-ass guillotines that if it wasn't a serious black belt on the level of Beneil, some guys might have been tapped out with that. And he showed in the Bobby Green fight very strong offensive wrestling. I mean, when's the last time you saw a guy pick Bobby Green up over his shoulders, walk him to the center of the octagon like Matt Hughes and slam him? Like, probably never. Well, Thiago Moises did that. And when it was 1-1 in the third round and it was time to dig deep, Thiago Moises dig deep. And I felt like that was the best performance of his career. Now, granted, there's a lot of room for improvement because when a big volume of punches is coming at him, he does kind of shell up. He does kind of, it's not the best looks in terms of the body language, but he sucked it up, man. He sucked it up, man. He got it together. He ended up pulling out that fight. I thought it was a legit win. So basically, what I'm trying to say is I'm very excited for this lightweight fight, Dan Tom.
Yeah, man. I'm with you there. I feel like again we don't share takes pre-show, but I feel like we're on the same sides and maybe on the same things this week, which is kind of weird because the public feels the other way. Alex Hernandez was open at -140, and he's been bet up at a whole 50 cents. And anybody knows me, like Thiago Moises and Askar Askarov at the very top of my list for guys I want to fade for maybe winning some fights they shouldn't have. Now, upon second rewatch, I do agree. Even though it was a shot that Bobby Green thought it was in his eye, it was clean in the first round. That wasn't enough just to barely sway it. And then that plus the slew of missed shots, which is the John Jones special, go back to that first Gustafsson fight, secures him the third round because I think he throws like 12 shots. Literally, they all miss except for one left hand. Bobby Green lands the better left hand, but judges and commentators alike don't see the counter or the more slicker, more craftier, better shot. See Barber and Grasso. And so it didn't get called. But nothing actually lands. But that being said, he threw more, right? So you could see why they gave the round to him. It wasn't a robbery for anybody calling that. And I was on Bobby Green in that fight. I've never been impressed by Moises. I do think it's a lot of hype. It's a lot of IBJJF, which I'm not a big fan of. I don't think it translates that well. However, even though Michael Johnson gives away submissions, so people need to be careful not to overvalue that. The fact is, whether it's leg locks or guillotines, Moises offers those entry and counter wrestling, those bottom and opportunistic, all those check boxes threats. And I'm a big fan of OAM, by the way. But OAM is a judo black belt before he was a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. And most of his attacks are top attacks. Alexander Hernandez didn't have any of those things to worry about. So he could plow him into the fence and wrestle and grind. And, even then it was a lot closer than some people may remember if you go back and watch that OAM Hernandez fight. So that's the differentiators in the grappling. Volume still worries me about Moises because even though he was landing the hard shots and this and that, like he wasn't throwing crap for volume. Like the guy, I don't think I've seen the guy throw 3 strikes together in my life, which is kind of frustrating. That being said, even though I say all these things and criticisms, he did have a much better performance his last time out, Dan. And this line really surprises me, the opening of it, especially the movement of it. I'm actually going to be on Moises here. Again, you talked about leg kicks, that match. I talked about it in the Bueno Silva match, another fight I'm going to be looking at very closely. I'm going to bring up the point that we both brought up here, Dan. It's that Hernandez, when he got his big knockout, it was from a southpaw stance against Beneil Dariush. We didn't get to see how that grappling played out, right? Whereas we at least got to see how the grappling played out against Benny and Thiago Moises. MMA math doesn't work. Styles make fights. Go ahead and throw that connector piece out of there. However, even though he was trying to do his Dillashaw that Dan referenced, he's been doing it a lot less. And I'm a big fan of Factory X. Much respect, just like Dan gives respect to Mark Montoya. You all know I give much respect to Mark Montoya. That being said, it looks like Mark has him fighting out of orthodox. And if you look at his last fight, he didn't even go to southpaw once, Dan, and he was really heavy on the front foot. And every leg kick that was thrown his way from Gritzmacher, he ate. And what was his response? Was it to check it? No. Was it to step back and defend it? No. Was it to throw a counter right every time Gritzmacher threw the leg kick? No, he didn't do any of the basic 3. He decided, I'm going to fire back and fire the harder shots. Now, the leg kicks didn't do anything because it ended up being a left hook against the fence that put Gritzmacher out. And if anything, the leg kicks that he returned with hurt him more, and that's by Alexander Hernandez's own admission, who in his post-fight interview is like, I got a big freaking lump on my foot. That means not only did you return kicks, making arguably the wrong choice, you weren't kicking them right if you were, and I'm not far from criticizing, but we're breaking down what happened, right? Like he hurt himself trying to do the wrong thing he probably shouldn't have been doing. And against, a guy like Thiago Moises who criticizes volume all you want, what else does he do besides the right hand that me and Dan talked about? It was the calf kick and leg kick. So I feel like Moises is, the right hands and right leg kicks, like the exact stance that Hernandez is going from. And you look at his Instagram, he's doing pads the same way in the lead up to this camp. I feel like he's like making Moises' job easier for him. You know what I'm saying? Between his responses to the way he's standing, I don't like that. I don't like how the grappling's going to go for him. And like Dan Levy said, you're going to want a guy who's got a good gas tank, good wrestling, and more just consistent game plan to beat a Moises, right? Whereas Hernandez, the gas tank, the game plan, his game in general is still a question mark. So to see people that this confident, maybe they know something that we don't, Dan, but I'm on the same side as you, bud. I'm going to go Moises here by submission. By decision is probably the most likely, but even a stoppage by strikes wouldn't surprise me given what we've seen. So it's no secret where I'll be siding with.
I mean, you remember my biggest concern going into the Bobby Green fight for Bobby Green against Moises. I was like, listen, I think Bobby probably wins, but Bobby fights with his hands down, and Moises kicks so damn hard, especially upstairs. You know, Alex Hernandez has been knocked out with a head kick before in the UFC. Not trying to do any MMA math, not trying to say because this happened, it'll happen again. But I'm just saying, excuse me, I'm just saying openings I've seen in the past are things that Thiago Moises can capitalize. It's just these first 4 minutes. Alex Hernandez is hell on wheels. Alex Hernandez will have a speed advantage and volume in the first 4 or 5 minutes. But he goes so hard that he kind of runs himself into a wall a little bit. I'm curious if he's going to pace himself a little better and the reason I'm curious is because that last fight, people are saying there's a new man under, Coach Montoya, who, again, I respect very much. But it's like his last fight lasted under 2 minutes. Right. So, I mean, I don't, and he went balls to the wall. I'm curious to see what would happen, against a more formidable opponent if he goes at that pace and he doesn't get the guy out of there. Moises hasn't been finishing 18 pro fights. And I mean, all due respect to Gritzmacher, Artem Lobov knocked him out in the first round, right? So I'm just saying that's not the first time we've seen that before. It would be a first for Moises. So first round, shit's gonna be a little sketchy, man. He's gonna cover up against the fence. He's gonna eat some shots, but if he is still standing and if he is not badly compromised, I think he's got something for Alexander Hernandez. And I think in the second and third, he can kind of take over, edge it out, win a decision. But I'm very curious because the winner's taking a big step up. I mean, the winner is about to fight someone in the top 10, the top 15. This is one of those prospect showdowns similar to Casey Kenny versus Nathaniel Wood, where the winner takes that big step up next. You saw the winner did take, but that the winner got Dominic Cruz for Christ's sake, right? So the winner of Moises and Alexander Hernandez, I guarantee you, are fighting either a top 15 guy next or like a legend or something like that, Dan Tom. So huge fight at lightweight. Listen, I understand if you slightly edge Hernandez here, but at the betting window, when I say slightly edge, I don't mean minus 200, Dan Tom. I mean, closer to where it opened, minus 140, minus 130, something like that. Okay, I understand. Probably no value on Moises there. But plus 165, plus 170, let's roll the dice. Let's see, Dan. I want to know. Maybe I'm dead wrong. Maybe he gets starched in the first round for the first time in 19 fights. Maybe. But until that happens, Dan Tom, I'm rolling the dice. I'm going with the dog here. I got Thiago Moises via very close decision. Maybe even the kind of decision that people cry robbery on. But if you're going to cry robbery, it's better to be on the dog than laying minus 200. So let's see if it indeed is that type of fight. Get past this early blitz, this early storm, and you are 100% live in this fight, Thiago. I'll go with Moises to get it done.
I hate myself for backing Moises, but I'm with you, Dan.
Look, he's been improving, man. I understand where you're coming from because there were moments in some of these past fights where it's like, again, back to this whole thing. It's never been, oh, he doesn't kick hard. It's never been, oh, his jiu-jitsu sucks. It's never been, oh, he's not a physical boy. He's not big. It's never been like he doesn't have the size or the proper training or the age, or it's always just been mental. It's always just been, again, sometimes he'll back himself up, and let you tee off on him. Maybe he doesn't feel as confident, but these are things that you can improve in the gym. The mental game is so huge here. It's not a matter of improving his technique. It's just getting more comfortable inside the octagon. And I guarantee you, when you're in the practice room with guys like Dustin Poirier, Jorge Masvidal, Renato Moicano, all these guys every single day, it's only going to elevate your game to that next level. And proof is you saw him win a decision against Bobby Green and look the best he's ever looked. And that's still a work in progress. That's still not the final version of Thiago Moises. There were still areas that needed to be improved. And if he just makes those incremental improvements every single fight, I think he's got a chance to go far. Whereas with Hernandez, he has been improving. He has been getting seasoned. But there's something about that balls to the wall approach that, again, just like we talked about with fighters in the past, the Vitor Belfort approach, where if you blitz these guys, you push that pedal to the metal, you're going 100 miles per hour on the highway. It's only nature. It's only science that the gas tank is going to diminish. That's just how it works, quicker than it would diminish if you paced yourself. So let's see how hard Alexander comes out in the early going. And let's see how Thiago Moises responds, Dan Tom. I cannot wait.
I agree. Well said.
Now, Dan Tom, I'm very excited about this welterweight matchup between Alex Cowboy Oliveira, the Brazilian cowboy. I don't care what anyone says. He's a legend of the sport. I mean, who doesn't love a good Alex Cowboy fight? And he's one of those guys, just like Donald Cowboy Cerrone, that if you call him on a week notice, 2-day notice, 1-day notice, 2-hour notice, he'll be like, okay, sure, sign me up. I'm down to fight. And he's also got, like, I know my boy Dan Tom likes to bring up the stat. What is it? 3 baby mamas on the same block. I mean,
It's right.
Not, he's a real cowboy. And he's welcoming Ramazan Kuramagomedov to the UFC. And obviously, by the name, he's Russian. But don't just let his nationality and his last name fool you. This guy's got the skills. This guy's got the goods. He's got the size. And he's got the experience outside the UFC, Dan Tom. Because look, I'm very familiar with him because my good friend and Best Fight Pick sponsored athlete Robert King Hale actually fought Ramazan Kuramagomedov in the PFL. And, my boy Robert Hale is a lightweight. He's a very big lightweight. He fought him at 170. And it was a fantastic fight, 3-round war. And if you go watch that fight, you can see that nice Best Fight Picks logo on Robert Hale shorts, because PFL only allows you to have one sponsor per fighter. So Best Fight Picks was the sponsor in that fight. Ramazan won a decision. And if you actually look at the strike count, Robert Hale landed a lot more head strikes, but the kicks of Kuramagomedov, the takedown entries, man. And he brings something different to the table because he can do all the things that you love about the Russian fighters. Like, if he needs to play it safe, he can do the Russian coast. If he needs to come out here and a head kick knock someone out, he can do that too. If he wants to show off his boxing, no problem. Sambo, he'll take you to the ground, no problem, Dan Tom. But you know what else this guy brings to the table? He's also got he's got a little bit of flash to his game too. He's got a little bit of the Zabit going on too. I mean, like, right when you think that, he's just going to coast for the rest of this round, boom, spinning back elbow. Right when you think that, hey, he got his points for this round, now he's just going to circle away and let the clock end. No, flying knee. So he's one of these guys that he's very unpredictable, and he's only 8 fights into his career. And I always talk about this. These fighters with 10 or less pro fights, they're going to be making these huge leaps every single time we see them fight. And to take it a step further, he's fucking huge for 170 pounds. I mean, this is a guy on Contender Series. He fought at 85s, Dan Tom. Now he's dropping to 70 once again, where he's fought before, comfortably made the weight. And I know a couple days short notice, what kind of shape is he in? Guys, this guy trains year round. Like, there's no what kind of shape is he in. He's been ready for this opportunity for a long time. And I think he's going to capitalize. Look, Alex Cowboy, I love the guy. It's Alex Cowboy. He's a mini legend to hardcore fans like us, man. What's not to love about Alex Cowboy? And his brutal clinch, those knees in the clinch. He's got heavy hands, one-punch knockout power, mixing takedowns as well. You remember the destruction of Will Brooks that Alex Cowboy had back when Will Brooks was, beat Michael Chandler twice, was this very hyped prospect. And the way Alex Cowboy derailed his that hype train, and you've seen some of the other wins he's had along the way. Alex Cowboy is going to be in the UFC for the rest of his career. My issue with this fight is that Alex Cowboy from time to time makes a lot of bonehead mistakes. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's the kind of guy where like you kick him and it hurts you. You know what I mean? He's very dense. He's very bony. He's one of these guys where the fight's going to hurt unless you get him out there quick, win, lose, or draw. So shit's going to get rough. But I know that Kuramagomedov can dig deep. Look at that Jordan Williams fight when he was absolutely exhausted, but he's still spinning. He's still throwing flying knees. He's still mixing in takedowns. Look at the 3-round fight with Robert Hill, where Robert threw like over 100 head strikes. Like Robert was going after him. And Robert's a very explosive and talented young man, a very hard hitter. I know he's a lightweight, but he's, a lightweight with a 77-inch reach, right? So he's one of these guys that can hurt anybody. And to see Kuramagomedov at only 22 years old handle that test the way he did, then he goes to Contender Series against a very gritty guy in Jordan Williams. And then his subsequent fight on the regional scene destroys the guy. I think he's ready right here, right now. It's just about, there's a big experience gap, no doubt about it. I mean, look at all the fights Alex Cowboy's had inside the octagon. Look at what he's accomplished. But now we're starting to see these kind of guys that, weren't around back when he was around coming out here and giving him, tough times, whether it's Shavkat Rakhmonov, whether it's Nicholas Dalby. I know the ref played a part in that, but still to fight that close with a guy that you would have beat a couple years ago, the Mike Perry fight. So I'm starting to see glimpses here and there. Not that Alex Cowboy is necessarily declining, but that some of he was always the guy that like when he lost fights, it would be like mental lapses. Like he dominated Gilbert Durinho and then gets submitted in the 3rd round. The Donald Cerrone fight was only a couple minutes, but those couple minutes, Alex Cowboy pins Donald Cowboy up against the fence, landing brutal knees. You're like, God damn, Alex Cowboy's about to put him on him. Gets, I forgot if it was a mounted triangle or who took who down, but one submission attempt, it wasn't even fully locked in, and Alex was like, no more. So Alex has no issues. If you put that arm around the neck, he's got no issues tapping quick, and that is not to call someone with 20 UFC fights a quitter, or I would never use those words about a man like Alex Cowboy Oliveira, who is a real badass. But when the going gets tough, he is not really the kind of guy to overcome adversity. I guess the only time I can recall, because I had a max bet on him against Carlos Condit when Condit took his back and made me freak out, he survived that spot. So thank God. That's one instance I can recall. But all that stuff aside, I know I can ramble forever. I think Ramazan is just going to kind of be the crisper guy here, the hungrier guy here. And the difference is that if Ramazan gets in a bad spot, I think he's going to, just like, remember when Evloev was in that Darshok attempt against Grundy, which 99% of the roster is tapping to, but Evloev somehow creates the littlest of space to get out, and then all of a sudden he starts dominating the fight. Ramazan's got the same mindset. Like, he might get in a bad spot or two, but he ain't panicking. He's ready to get back out. This guy's from Dagestan. You know what the deal is, Dan Tom. But Cowboy, you put him in some bad spots, and dude, his paycheck is so high. Just give me my 6 figures and let me live to fight another day. No big deal, and I don't hold it against him, man. Why take unnecessary damage when you're at this point in your career? Like, let's have some longevity. So I don't blame Alex at all. So I think Ramazan wins this fight. I'm really not sure how. I don't know if it's going to be a knockout. I don't know if it's going to be a submission. I don't know if it's going to be a decision. I just know that I've been waiting for Ramazan Kuramagomedov to be in the UFC for a very long time. And I rarely disagree with my boy Dana White. And before someone's like, oh, you're a UFC shill. I mean, listen, I've always been a very honest guy. If I disagree with something, I always say how I feel. Let me tell you about one time I disagreed with Dana White when he said that Ramazan Kuramagomedov lost that fight to Jordan Williams. I disagree, Dana. I love you, Dana, but actually, I scored that fight for Ramazan, and I thought it was a very gritty performance, and I thought he should have been signed to the UFC last night. Dana actually broke Ramazan's heart when he said that. Like, you see Ramazan all busted up going in the back room. Like, he just fought his heart out, 3 hard rounds, best fight of that night. Like, we were like, yeah, damn, like, sign both these guys right now, right? It was like one of those fights. And Dana's like, I thought Jordan Williams won, so I can't sign this guy. And it was like, you could see like that hurt Ramazan so bad. Like, you know, the cameras were on him, so he was trying to hide the fact that the tears were about to come out. But like, I mean, that hurt my feelings too, Dan Tom. But guess what? Goes back to the regional scene, destroys his opponent. Now he gets it all worked out. Now he gets to fight the biggest opponent of his career on the biggest card of his career in his UFC debut. And I think he makes the most of it. I think he's ready to rise to the occasion. And honestly, it might have been a blessing in disguise that Dana didn't sign him that night, because now he got the chance to go back, get some even more experience, some more training time. And I think we're going to see the best version of Ramazan Kuramagomedov we've ever seen. I love Alex Cowboy. I got to go with Ramazan here.
I like that last part that you said there. I think it could have been a blessing in disguise for sure. Kuramagomedov is who I submitted as a pick. And I'm going to stick with that. I got to go back and watch some things, because even though I wrote and reviewed this guy, I think I only gave him a B. I can't remember if I had a hard stance on who won the fight. I just felt like he put up a good fight, but he came in as a minus 700 favorite. So maybe there's an argument that, you know, you should have done better or this or that. I don't know. I got to go rewatch it before I have any hard opinions. However, what does sell me is not just the staying in shape. I know it's an easy thing to say, but come to think about it, and I hate to blanket judgment or stereotype a region or regions, but, you know, some positive stereotyping, if you will. Dan, humor me for a second. When it comes to guys from Eastern Bloc, Russia, Dagestan, even like looking in their IGs, I know you do a bit of that study as well, Dan, right? You gotta look at what you can. You don't really see much of those guys blowing up in between fights ever. I'm trying to think of some right now. Like, unless they were like Fedor or Vovchanchin, where they were just kind of like always like that. Like, they didn't really blow up between fights. Can you really think of one in any weight class? I can't, man. These guys look, when you look at them off season, they don't look very different. They're their physique, right, Dan?
Exactly. And Dan Tom, there's a reason behind that. And it's not, you know, oh, they're blessed with such amazing genetics. No, no, no. These guys got the discipline. These guys got the work ethic, the mental fortitude, Dan Tom. These guys do not stop. And they kind of all consider themselves brothers and cousins, which is interesting, because like you've heard about like 10 different fighters being Khabib's cousin or Zabit's cousin, which like I love the family aspect about it, but it's more than just hyperbole, Dan Tom. These guys hold each other accountable. When you got 20 of the baddest men on planet Earth in a training room and one guy doesn't show up, you think they're just going to let that slide? You think they're just going to be like, oh, you wanted to sleep in late tonight? Yeah, no big deal. No,
Right.
they're going to be like, do you want to be a fucking UFC world champion or not? Do you want to represent this team or not? Do you want to follow father's plan? You know, the great Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, rest in peace. Like, do you want to be part of this or not? Because what they stand for is every single day. What they stand for is these guys wake up at 5 a.m. What they stand for is they're going to be in the gym from dusk till dawn. So I would be shocked if Ramazan Kuramagomedov, despite taking this fight on a couple days short notice, comes in looking soft. I would be shocked if he missed weight. I would be shocked if he gassed out in this fight. So, I mean, Dan Tom, I got Ramazan Kuramagomedov. And yes, I agree with your point on that for sure. These guys do not blow up between camps.
Yeah, and I'll go with Ramazan too as well, just because he is the bigger fighter. Alex, you know, this isn't a lightweight or a former lightweight. This guy's fought a few times at middleweight, and he's got, even though he's young, he's won a couple of Russian MMA cups, which is essentially like amateur. But with the Russian amateurs, it's hard to tell the difference between amateur and pro, given their rule sets. Whereas in the States, it's much more harder to define whether it's a shin pad organization or the elbow rules. So their amateur fights are like pro fights out there. And he came up through that program, as well as freestyle wrestling, competing in freestyle wrestling since the age of 10. So that alone will favor me over Alex Oliveira's clinch game, which was really effective at lightweight, less so at welterweight. Give me Ramazan.
And last but not least, I know Dan Tom's very, very excited about this light heavyweight showdown between two I don't know if I want to call them Greek gods, but two just, you see these guys' physique and you're probably like, yeah, these guys are doing something. And when I say doing something, I don't mean doing steroids. I mean like these guys are like pro athletes, or these guys are fighters, these guys are football players, or they're doing something. Like they're not just regular human beings. I'm talking about William Knight versus Alonzo Menifield. And much respect to Sean Shelby, Mick Maynard, Dana White. Like, I love the fact that you guys aren't out here protecting guys. And before some fans like, what do you mean? Conor McGregor, guy, Conor McGregor fought Max Holloway in his second fight. Conor McGregor fought Dustin Poirier in his second fight. So don't even try me on any bullshit like that. But back to this point, Dan Tom, I love the fact that they're not protecting anybody. I know Alonzo's coming off 2 straight losses. They're not giving him some cupcake, but they're giving him another hungry, young, improving prospect. And these are the kind of fights I like to see, just like Dusko versus Puna, 2 great prospects. Now, I know Alonzo's kind of fallen on hard times, but like, he lost to 2 guys in the top 20. He probably wasn't ready for them yet. You got to be on a certain level to beat Ovince St. Preux. And even though I have a lot of criticism of Devin Clark, you still have to be on a certain level to beat him. Alonzo's just not on that level. Now we're getting back to reality. And when I say back to reality, I don't necessarily mean that Alonzo's going to win this fight. I just mean that this is a more, reasonable matchup. Because, 9-1 versus 9-2, right? Similar records, similar styles to an extent. Like, as in they both can, launch their opponent out of the cage. If they punch him, he goes flying into the 5th row. But there are some differences too, Dan Tom, and let me point what those are. It seems to me like when Alonzo goes past the first round, he kind of visibly fatigues. Now, every fighter gets tired, don't get me wrong, but fatigues to the point where it impacts his performance, where the volume visibly wanes, and to where, he's kind of hanging on. Like, he can knock anybody out at any point with one of those lunchbox fists. You already know what the deal is, Dan Tom. But William Knight, you know what I like about this guy? It's funny. We can sit here, we can talk about his physique, we can talk about his athleticism, his explosiveness. I don't even want to talk about any of that, Dan Tom. You know what I want to talk about? I want to talk about this guy's resolve. I want to talk about this guy's heart. I want to talk about this guy's will to win, which I think are way more important qualities when you talk about a future champion than, how big someone is or this or that. Because, you saw my boy Henry Cejudo, who's 5'4", winning 2 belts in 2 weight classes. You saw Frankie Edgar back in the day, 10 years. It used to be 10 years ago. Now it's like 11 years ago. Time flies. You saw a little 5'6" Frankie Edgar dethrone the great BJ Penn. So to me, like, the size part, because that famous quote, it's not about the size of the dog, it's about the fuck. Wow. I'm about to fuck this one up. What is it, Dan Tom?
It's not about the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog.
Yes, thank you very much. And I guess, all the fans, you're going to clip this one. It's going to go viral, make fun of me for fucking up that quote.
No.
That's cool. That's cool, because we got the great Dan Tom getting it right. So I appreciate you, my friend. But listen, that applies to William Knight, because he's one of these guys that he hasn't had any easy fights. You look at his regional fights, he was in there with Tafan and Chukwi, who was like a killer. Yeah. He was in there with Cody Brundage, who's, 1 or 2 fights away from getting signed to the UFC. He was in there with Stipe Miocic's protege, Alexa Kamer, who was undefeated at the time. And a lot of sharp people were picking Alexa Kamer, not just to win, they were picking him confidently to win that fight. So he's beat some really good guys you got to beat to get to that next level, some good regional prospects. And here with Alonzo Menifield, on one hand, you can say, look, Menifield's fought the higher level of competition. He's been in there with OSP. It's just that not only did he not pass the OSP test, but he showed. So sometimes when fighters take a loss to someone that's a step up in competition, like, for example, Nikita Krylov versus Glover Teixeira, that was a loss, but it showed Nikita's improving. And it showed that, hey, like, you know what? He might have lost to a guy that's about to fight for a title, but Nikita will be back, and Nikita will be back better than ever. And that's what you saw. Whereas with Menifield and St. Preux, it's kind of like, hey, like, maybe we need to take a bit of a step back. Because, like, after Nikita and Glover, we weren't saying Nikita needs to take a step back. We were saying, like, hey, Nikita, I know it was a loss, but that was a great showing, man. Like, that was a fucking great back and forth split decision fight. I can't wait for your next one. Whereas with Menifield and OSP, it was like, oh, so we got to take a couple steps back. And not to get too personal, but after Menifield knocked out Paul Craig, and I don't know if this has anything to do with anything. I'm just going to kind of throw it out there. He's kind of posting, memes and stuff about like how it feels your first day back in the gym, or how it feels when that 50K bonus deposit hits, and he's doing the pimp walk and shit like that. These guys get so cocky. They get one bonus, then they think they can't lose a fight. They get one bonus, they think they're God's gift to fighting. You see his next fight against Devin Clark, he's only got gas for 2 minutes. And Devin Clark, I respect him. I respect everyone that steps in there. But Devin Clark, the reason I criticize him so much, has he changed his style at all since he's been in the UFC? Granted, he's improved. He's more comfortable in the octagon by default, but he's still that same old spastic guy that's looking to do the exact same thing every fight. And I mean, if you're legit, you're going to capitalize and touch that guy on the chin one time, and the fight's going to be over shortly after. So it was very alarming. Alonzo couldn't pass that test. And even though I picked OSP the 2 times they fought, it's like that was even worse than Tom. That was like, man, we really got to take 10 steps back. Like, I want to see Alonzo Menifield fight like, some fat guy, like, just fight like some like, like let him get his confidence back. Let him get in there with some guy that's not on his level, that he can just come out here. Okay. So how about this? Alonzo Menifield versus like Ike Villanueva. And I all due respect to Ike, he had a beautiful knockout over Vinicius Mamouche. But I feel like that's a reasonable fight right there. And again, Alonzo comes out here, beats William Knight, then maybe that invalidates everything I'm saying. And maybe he does do that. Maybe he's been making improvements. Maybe the OSP fight was what he needed to take things to that next level. But to me, seeing kind of no improvement in those 2 fights and just kind of seeing what I saw, I feel like he kind of, his confidence is probably down in the dumps right now. He needs that tune-up fight. William Knight ain't no tune-up fight. He's a guy that kind of has a little bit of the Black Beast thing going on, where you'll put him in some bad spots and, he's full mounted. Then 2 seconds later, he explodes out and he knocks you unconscious. Whereas, like, if you full mount Alonzo Menifield, he ain't getting out. He's going to gas out. Then he's going to stop throwing. Then he's going to lose a decision. Whereas William Knight's going to fight to the bitter end. And I think that's the difference here. Look, I think Alonzo is obviously live for a knockout. Either guy is. These are 2 big boys that look like Greek gods that can knock anybody out if they touch you right on the chin. So I'm not discounting the possibility of Alonzo Menifield knockout. In fact, William Knight has been knocked out before by Tafon Chuki, who I mentioned. But if this fight goes past the first round, this fight becomes a battle of wills. If these 2 have to dig deep and find out who the tougher man is, it's William Knight. So I'm going with William Knight to win a gritty fight. I'm not sure if it's going to be a finish. I'm not sure if it's going to be a decision. I just know that this is a coin flip fight. It's lined a coin flip fight. It's 50-50. And I'm going to go with the guy with more fight, and that's William Knight. So that's my pick.
Man, not a lot of dissension on this show today, folks. And in fact, not only did me and Dan agree on the picks here, but I believe we're with the odds makers too, with favorites. And again, it's a pick 'em right now. But to be fair, the odds setters at least agreed with me and Dan, because I too like Thick Willie, baby, Thick Willie Knight in this spot. And it's because a lot of the things that Dan said about Alonzo, and I don't know if he's going to make those upgrades, right? Because, and don't get me wrong, with a lot of situations, although Texas seems a bit more pliable state. So I don't know the story. Perhaps you do, Dan, but it feels like he's been less with Fortis, and now he's actually officially under the Saxon banner. I know Coach Saif Sayoud still, I'm taking they still have a good relationship. He still went out on his birthday to corner him for that OSP fight, right? That was on Coach Saif's birthday. And I'm high on Coach Saif. I know you are too. Dan, much respect there. Much respect to the Fortis crew. But it looks like he's mainly at Saxon there, and I don't know, pictures practicing my Muay Thai. I don't know if that's the thing you got to be practicing, Alonzo. I would think it's more cardio, wrestling, transitions, and flows, but that's just me. What the hell do I know? I'm a dude with glasses, right? The point is, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to make those upgrades, though. If I got to judge by what I see, So is it a knockout or bust situation? I do think so. And that is the worst against. I know I threw out the Derek Lewis comparison to start the show, Dan, but I'm going to go ahead and close it because I feel like over Rozenstruik, who deserves that comparison, is Thick Willie Knight. I mean, he's got the tripod getup, folks. Easy. He's got the tripod getup just like Derek Lewis, right? We seen him there with Cody Bredes just stalling things out. He's like, give me your best shot, wrestler submission guy. Oh, is that your specialty? Okay, hold my beer. Granted, I know the ref had to help him out with that one, but the point is, this guy's a stymie and kind of a cat. We saw that with the Alexa Kimore in the clinch exchanges and so on and so forth, right? Like this William Knight guy can stymie people. Whereas we look at his Instagram and you go over there, and the dude is looking in not just fantastic shape, he always does, but he looks almost a little tighter. And he's actually said in a lot of his posts that he focused on getting more lean, working on cardio, fight IQ, like all the things that he lists. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what you want to do. I want a guy like William Knight who's still green and super bulky to worry about more of his fight physique, not worry about what he looks like, right? Even though he still looks amazing, by the way. But the point is he's making it functional. He's working on, he says he's working on shoring up the stuff that he needs to work on. And that's the kind of, now again, it's fight night. Who knows? We could get the same William Knight. He could come out and get a really unimpressive win. You know what I'm saying? But the point is, as far as headspace goes, momentum, all those check boxes, I see that with Thick Willie Knight. And yeah, man, it's a battle of muscly dudes here. I'm gonna go with the more Derek Lewis kind of energy, big dick energy there that William Knight brings to the table, baby.
I feel you there. And real quick, let me not necessarily defend his decision to go to Saxon Muay Thai, but let me see if I can empathize with the decision. And here's what I think, because look, you mentioned like, hey, why aren't we putting more attention to the strength and conditioning? And to me, it's like, I think he has been running his miles. I think he is in the weight room. Look at the guy's physique. I think it's more of a pacing thing or a mental thing. But the reason why it might actually turn out to be a good thing to go to Saxon Muay Thai is because you saw that last fight with OSB. There's got to be some cleanup in Alonzo's stand-up. No doubt about it. Even the fact that he didn't knock out Devin Clark, who fights with his chin straight up in the air and has been spastic and prone to getting knocked out his entire career. I think kind of the fact that he couldn't capitalize on that or even have more moments than he would have expected against Vince, I think that might be the catalyst where it's like, hey, maybe we do have to address the technical aspect of that part of the game, because it's like, I have this one punch knockout power. Alonzo, that is, not Daniel Levy. Alonzo, yeah. He does have that destructive one punch knockout power. So, but at the UFC level, it's not enough to just be a hard hitter, Dan Tom. You got to also know how to set up your shots. You got to have good technique. You got to mix it up. And hopefully that's what he's gaining at Saxon. Because, like, if this guy has a little bit more direction with his striking, I mean, we could see a Francis Ngannou type guy. You remember those knockouts he had on the come up? They were, you remember the Paul Craig knockout? It was vicious. But if you want to critique that performance, one could say, he actually didn't look too good until the knockout. What really happened. Watch the tape and maybe open two windows, pull up Craig versus Menifield, and then listen to me talking about it. Because this is what happened. Paul Craig got a little cocky, throwing a bunch of spin kicks to the head. I don't know why, Dan Tom. Paul Craig is an opportunistic submission guy, not a spin kicker. If it was Edson Barboza, okay. I mean, don't get me wrong. Try new things in the octagon. If it works, it works. Hey, shin to chin, baseball bat, hey, you can knock the guy out. But I'm kind of thinking to myself, when Alonzo Menifield's one path to victory is to knock you unconscious, why are you out here trying low percentage moves against him? But I digress. He goes out there, Paul Craig, that is, throws like 3 spinning head kicks in a row. And on the third one, he kind of had his back turned to Menifield. Menifield cracked him one time, a couple follow-ups. The fight was over shortly after. It wasn't because Menifield had this beautiful pull counter game or a slip and rip or, some refined Muay Thai techniques that helped him get it. It was just a big, powerful, explosive man fighting against a person who left his chin exposed, the rest was history. But as you move up the ranks in the UFC, you got to be able to set up these shots. It's not enough to be a hard hitter anymore, Dan Tom. So that's why I kind of think that maybe it might be a good move for him to go to Saxon Muay Thai. But don't neglect the guy that brought you to the dance either, because Saif Saud, one of the best coaches in the game today, and you still got to address every other area of the game because William Knight gets on top of you. I'm not quite convinced Alonzo Menifield's getting back up. But I will say this, Dan Tom. Alonzo has some underrated takedown defense. It took Devin Clark until the third round to successfully take him down. But it did not take Devin Clark until the third round to successfully pin him up against the fence and drain his gas tank completely. So Alonzo's got to make a lot of big improvements, and I think he can. I think he will. It's just I'd like to see him kind of get a tune-up. I do not consider William Knight a tune-up. Look, either guy can get knocked out, but I'm going to go with the more confident guy and the more well-rounded guy, and that's William Knight here, Dan Tom.
Put me down for Thick Willie as well.
Well, Dan Tom, you know, I got to thank you so much for joining me on this special edition of the Line Movement MMA Betting Show. Always a pleasure talking fights with you, my friend. I look forward to doing it again for a very long time, my friend. You know, I'm always down to talk fights with Dan Tom since day one. Want to thank everybody in the Line Movement family, everybody behind the scenes. There's so many of y'all, so thank you very much. I know I kept like leaving someone out every time I would shout out the name, so now I'm just saying, hey, the whole team. I love all you guys, so thank you very much.
There we go.
And,
same here.
And to the fans, man, the fans, thank you so much, fans, for enjoying this video. Please give us a like, a subscribe here on YouTube, but then also go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe there, give us a 5-star review. And Line Movement, not only do they got the MMA betting show, but my boy James Lynch has been doing this thing. You already know about my boy Nick Kyprios, the Kipper. I mean, come on, you know, NHL legend. So, you know, he's been doing this thing. So Line Movement's got a lot of cool stuff going on. You don't want to miss out on it. So linemovement.com @line_movement. You guys know what to do. Follow me at Best Fight Picks. Follow him at Dan Tom MMA. Linemovement.com. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy the fights, and we will speak soon. What's up, Line Movement fam? If you liked what you saw, make sure you click on any of the videos on your screen and subscribe to Line Movement today.